Welcome to the first session of our second semester together. Today, we are going to learn about arrays. An array is like a list of variables you can loop on, which lets you handle large amounts of data easily. Like variables, an array must be declared, which can be done in a few ways. Since arrays on top of a name, type, and contents have a first and last index, we need to state the size on declaration. Once the array is declared, you can refer to its elements by their index, just like how you refer to cells and worksheets by their index. A variable can only contain one thing. It is of dimension 0. You can't move in any direction inside a variable. Arrays can have dimensions, typically 1 or 2. As you can see, a bidimensional array looks very much like a range. You refer to its elements like with cells, using 2 coordinates. Here are 2 ways you can declare an array. You can either state its first and last index on declaration, or just the last index, in which case the first index is going to be by default 0, or not. If you do not state an array's size on declaration, you can use the redeem statement to change its size later. This is useful if the size of the array can change. Declaring a bidimensional array works the same way. You state the first dimension, then the second dimension. Once you have an array with a size, you can assign values to its elements. Alternatively, you can assign values to the entire array at once. Start by declaring a variable as the variant type. Variant is a chameleon, which will fit the data you try to put into it. If you put an array into a variant, it will automatically extend to become an array variable of the appropriate size. One of the ways to create an entire array at once is by using the array function. This function is a bit static, so it is rarely useful outside of generating static data. If you want your default starting index to be 1 instead of 0, you can type option base1 before the macro. Another way to create an entire array at once is by using the split function. This is one of the best functions in VBA. It lets you create an array from a string by splitting it according to a delimiter character. For instance, it creates an array of words from a sentence, with your delimiter being a space. Since bidimensional arrays are analogous to ranges, another way to create an entire array at once is by dumping a range into it. However, there are a couple subtleties. For one thing, if you try to dump a unidimensional range into an array, you're going to end up with a bidimensional array, with a dimension of size 1, which is less than optimal. Therefore, we're going to use Excel transpose function to fix this. Transpose once if the source range is a single column, and twice if the source range is a single row. As you can see, if the source range is bidimensional, you don't need to transpose at all. You can also display your entire array to a range at once, but this is only possible if your array is bidimensional. If it is not, you need to display its elements one by one. Another consequence of arrays being like ranges is that Excel functions that work on ranges work on arrays. Most notably, the match function, which returns the relative position of an element within a range. Another function for arrays is called join. It is the reciprocal of split in that it takes as argument an array in a separated character and creates a single string. It is less useful than split. We also have the filter function. It takes as argument an array and a text to search for, and returns a filtered array containing only the elements of the original array that contain the text to search for, or do not contain the text to search for, depending on an optional argument. The ubound and lbound functions are analogous to the len function. They return the index of the first last element in an array. For a multidimensional array, state the number of the dimension for which you want that value as the second argument. That is to say, the rows are the first dimension, so to get the index of the last row, you would use lbound myArray1. Finally, you have three main ways to loop on arrays. The first is the for each loop. It is easy to set up, but doesn't allow you to modify the contents of the array, which is annoying. The second is a standard while loop with a counter. Start your counter on the lower bound of the array, keep going until it is greater than the upper bound of the array. The third is a for loop. For loops are like while loops, but they automate counter manipulation, which makes them shorter but less effective. For something that is not on the exam, jagged arrays. A jagged array is like a bidimensional array, except not all rows are the same size. You set it up not as a bidimensional array, but as an array of arrays. See this slide for code that creates a jagged array.